At Thanksgiving dinner, my parents called me a freeloader and said I had to be out by December. I quietly packed, canceled every bill in my name, and the next morning he showed up furious at my apartment. My name is Sarah, and I'm 24 years old. Until last month, I lived with my parents, Patricia and Robert, in their suburban house in Ohio. What they didn't know was that I was quietly subsidizing their entire lifestyle while they treated me like garbage. Let me back up and explain how this mess started. After college, I moved back home temporarily while job hunting. That temporarily stretched into 2 years, but not for the reasons you might think. I landed a great remote position as a digital marketing specialist about 6 months after graduation, making $75,000 a year. Pretty decent for someone my age, especially in our area. My parents had always been financially irresponsible. Dad worked construction when he could find steady work, and Mom was a part-time receptionist at a dental office. Together, they barely pulled in $40,000 annually. Their house was mortgaged to the hilt, credit cards were maxed out, and they were constantly behind on bills. When I started working, they asked if I could chip in for groceries occasionally. Being grateful for the roof over my head, I agreed. That quickly escalated. Soon I was paying for groceries, utilities, internet, cable, car insurance for all 3 vehicles, and even covering their cell phone plan. I was essentially covering about 60% of the household expenses while they pocketed their paychecks. The arrangement might have been tolerable if they treated me with basic respect. Instead, they treated me like an ungrateful child who couldn't manage her own life. Mom constantly criticized everything from my career choice to my appearance. Dad would make snide comments about me still living at home whenever his buddies came over, conveniently admitting that I was paying most of the bills. They had this narrative that I was a lazy freeloader who couldn't function independently. They'd tell relatives and neighbors about their burden of supporting their adult daughter. Meanwhile, I was working 50-hour weeks from the converted basement office I'd created and furnished myself, generating more income than both of them combined. The breaking point came on Thanksgiving Day 2024. We were having dinner with my Aunt Jennifer, Uncle Mike, and my cousins Tyler and Madison. The whole family was there, about 12 people total. Mom had spent the week complaining about the cost of hosting, despite the fact that I'd bought the turkey, all the sides, wine, and even the decorations. During dinner, conversation turned to Tyler's new apartment. He's 26 and just moved out of his parents' house. Everyone was congratulating him on his independence. That's when Dad decided to make his move. "Well, at least some kids know when it's time to leave the nest," he said, looking directly at me. "Sarah here seems content to freeload off her parents indefinitely." The table went quiet. I felt my face burning with embarrassment and anger. Aunt Jennifer looked confused because she'd always assumed I was helping my parents out financially, not the other way around. Mom jumped in to make it worse. "We've been more than generous, letting her stay rent-free for 2 years. Most parents would have kicked her out by now." I opened my mouth to defend myself, to explain that I was paying most of their bills, but Dad cut me off. "We've decided you need to be out by January 1st, he announced. "It's time you learned some responsibility." Uncle Mike looked uncomfortable and tried to change the subject, but the damage was done. I sat there in shocked silence while they continued their performance for our relatives. They painted themselves as long-suffering parents who had enabled their lazy daughter for too long. After everyone left, I confronted them privately. I pulled out my phone and showed them my banking app, proving exactly how much I'd been contributing to their household expenses. "This doesn't change anything," Mom said dismissively. "You're an adult. You should be out on your own anyway." That night, I made a decision that would change everything. If they wanted me out, I'd give them exactly what they asked for. But I wouldn't be subsidizing their lifestyle anymore. I started quietly making arrangements. I'd been saving money for a while, so I had enough for a deposit and several months of rent on my own place. I found a nice 1-bedroom apartment across town and signed the lease for January 1st. The landlord, Mrs. Chen, was understanding when I explained my situation and let me do the walkthrough and paperwork early. Here's where it gets interesting. Over the next few days, I systematically began removing myself from all the financial arrangements I'd been carrying. I called the electric company and removed my name from the account. Same with gas, water, trash collection, internet, and cable. I canceled my contributions to the car insurance policies for Mom and Dad's vehicles. I removed them from my cell phone plan. The key was timing. Most utilities require 60 days notice for service disconnection, so I scheduled everything to be turned off on January 1st. I also stopped buying groceries and started eating out or keeping food in a mini fridge I'd moved to my room. My parents didn't notice anything initially. They were too busy enjoying their Thanksgiving victory lap, telling anyone who'd listen about how they'd finally put their foot down with their freeloading daughter. During this time, I was also documenting everything. I printed out 2 years' worth of bank statements showing exactly how much I'd contributed to household expenses. I calculated that I'd paid roughly $42,000 toward their bills over those 2 years. I also documented their income versus expenses to show how they'd be unable to afford their current lifestyle without my contributions. I packed methodically, taking only things that belonged to me. My furniture, electronics, clothes, books, kitchen items I bought, everything I'd purchased for my home office setup. I'd been slowly moving boxes to a storage unit, so they wouldn't notice how much stuff was disappearing. The Friday after Thanksgiving, I gave my notice at work that I'd need the first Monday of January off to finish moving. My manager, Jessica, was totally understanding. I'd been a stellar employee, and she was actually excited that I was getting my own place. Saturday and Sunday, I made my final trips to the storage unit. By Sunday night, my room was basically empty except for the furniture that had been there when I moved in. Monday morning, January 1st, I loaded the last of my belongings into my car. I left a note on the kitchen counter explaining that I was respecting their wishes and moving out. I also left printed copies of all the financial documents I compiled, showing exactly how much I'd been contributing and when various services would be disconnected. The note was professional but pointed, as requested, "I'm moving out today. Since you've made it clear that I'm a freeloader who needs to learn responsibility, I'm taking full financial responsibility for my own life. All utilities and services I was covering have been transferred back to you effective today. Thank you for teaching me this valuable lesson about independence." I dropped my house key on the counter next to the note and drove to my new apartment. Mrs. Chen met me there with the keys, and I spent the day getting settled. It felt amazing to have my own space, decorated exactly how I wanted, with no one to criticize my choices or make me feel unwelcome. That evening, I ordered Thai food and sat in my new living room feeling genuinely happy for the first time in months. I turned off my phone, took a long bath, and went to bed early. The next morning, Tuesday, I was awakened at 7 a.m. by aggressive pounding on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and saw Dad standing there, red-faced and clearly furious. I opened the door cautiously, keeping the chain lock engaged. "What do you want?" "What the hell did you do?" he shouted. "The power's off, the internet's down, the phones don't work." I opened the door fully, crossing my arms. "I moved out, like you demanded. I took financial responsibility for my own life, like you said I needed to learn. You can't just shut off our utilities." He sputtered. "They weren't your utilities," I said calmly. "They were in my name because I was paying for them. Since I don't live there anymore, I had them disconnected." The look of realization that crossed his face was priceless. For the first time, he was understanding the full scope of what I'd been covering. "But how are we supposed to pay for all that?" he asked, and I could hear the panic creeping into his voice. "The same way other adults do," I replied. "With the money you earn from your jobs." Mom appeared behind him, looking equally frantic. "Sarah, you can't do this to us. We're your parents." "You're right," I said. "You're my parents. You raised me to be responsible and independent. This is me being responsible and independent." Dad was getting angrier. "You're being spiteful and vindictive." "I'm being exactly what you taught me to be," I responded. "Remember what you said at Thanksgiving dinner in front of the whole family? That I was a freeloader who needed to learn responsibility? Well, I learned." Mom started crying. "We didn't mean it like that. Come home and we'll figure this out." "Figure what out?" I asked. "You made it very clear that I was unwelcome. You humiliated me in front of our entire family. You painted me as a burden and a failure. I'm simply giving you what you said you wanted." "We were just trying to motivate you," Dad said weakly. "Mission accomplished," I replied. "I'm motivated to live my own life without being treated like garbage by people who should love and support me." I could see them both starting to panic as the reality of their financial situation hit them. Without my income covering the majority of their expenses, they couldn't afford their current lifestyle. "How much were you paying?" Mom asked quietly. I pulled out my phone and showed them the calculations I'd done. Roughly $1,800 per month. $42,000 over the past 2 years. Dad's face went white. "We didn't realize it was that much." "Because you never bothered to ask," I said. "You just assumed I was freeloading while I was actually subsidizing your entire life." They stood there in stunned silence for a moment before Dad's anger flared again. "You're being childish? Family helps family." "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "Family should help family. They should also respect each other, support each other, and not humiliate each other in front of relatives. When you decided I wasn't worthy of basic respect, you broke that family bond. So what, you're just going to let us lose everything?" Mom asked through her tears. "I'm not letting you do anything," I replied. "I'm simply not preventing the natural consequences of your own financial choices. You're both adults with jobs. You'll figure it out." Dad tried one more angle. What will people think when they find out you abandoned your parents? I laughed. You mean the same people you told that I was a freeloader living off your generosity? I think they'll be very interested to learn the truth about our arrangement. The conversation went in circles for another 20 minutes. They alternated between anger, guilt trips, and desperate pleading. I remained calm and consistent. They had asked me to leave and become independent, and I was honoring their request completely. You planned this. Dad suddenly accused. You've been planning this revenge since October. Actually, I planned it starting the day after Thanksgiving, I corrected. From the moment you humiliated me at Thanksgiving dinner until today. If you call learning responsibility and independence revenge, then I guess you taught me well. Mom tried a different approach. What about everything we've done for you? We raised you, fed you, clothed you, put you through college. You're absolutely right, I nodded. And I've been grateful for that every single day. That's exactly why I contributed over $67,000 to this household over the past 2 years. That's why I never complained when you criticized me constantly. That's why I put up with being treated like an unwelcome guest in my own home. We never treated you badly, she protested weakly. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app where I'd been tracking their comments. Should I read back some of the things you said? Like when you told Mrs. Patterson next door that you wished I'd just grow up and move out already so you could have your life back? Or when Dad told Uncle Mike that I was dead weight and you were stuck supporting me? Their faces paled. They had no idea I'd been writing down their treatment of me. You documented us? Dad asked, outraged. I wrote down the truth, I replied. Because I knew there would come a day when you'd try to rewrite history. Just like you're doing right now. Mom started crying harder. We're going to lose everything. The house, the cars, everything. No, you're going to have to live within your means, I corrected. Like millions of other Americans do every day. Like I'm doing right now in this apartment that I can actually afford on my own income. But we can't afford the mortgage without your help, Dad said desperately. Then you'll have to sell the house, I replied. Or find higher paying jobs. Or both. That's what responsible adults do when they can't afford their lifestyle. You're enjoying this, he accused. I considered that for a moment. You know what? I am enjoying something. I'm enjoying being treated with respect for the first time in 2 years. I'm enjoying living in a space where nobody criticizes my career, my clothes, my friends, or my life choices. I'm enjoying not walking on eggshells every single day. The truth of that statement seemed to hit them both hard. For the first time, they were quiet. I loved you both, I continued. I wanted to help you. But you turned my love and generosity into something ugly. You made me feel worthless and unwanted while taking my money. You humiliated me in front of our family while I was secretly keeping your household afloat. We didn't know how much you were contributing, Mom said quietly. Because you never asked, I shot back. You never once said thank you for anything I paid for. You never acknowledged my contributions. You just took and took while making me feel like a burden. Dad was getting defensive again. We gave you a place to live. I paid for that place to live, I corrected. I paid the mortgage, the utilities, the insurance, the upkeep. I was essentially your tenant, except tenants get treated better than I was. So what happens now? Mom asked. We're supposed to just struggle while you live comfortably? You're supposed to take responsibility for your own lives, I said firmly. The same thing you demanded I do. The same thing every other adult has to do. Finally, they left. I watched from my window as they sat in their car for another 15 minutes, probably trying to figure out their next move. But the drama was far from over. Within hours, my phone started ringing. First it was my grandmother, Patricia's mother, calling to lecture me about abandoning my parents. Apparently, Mom had called her crying, painting herself as the victim of her ungrateful daughter. Sarah Elizabeth, how could you do this to your parents? Grandma Rose demanded. They sacrificed everything for you. I calmly explained the real financial arrangement, showing her the bank statements I'd compiled. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. They told me you were living there rent-free, she said weakly. I was paying about $1,800 per month in various household expenses, I explained. Here, I'm paying $1,200 for rent and utilities combined. I'm actually saving money by living independently. Grandma Rose was quiet for a long moment. Why didn't you tell us what was really happening? Because I was embarrassed, I admitted. I was embarrassed that my own parents treated me so poorly despite everything I was doing for them. I kept hoping things would get better. She apologized profusely and promised to have a serious conversation with my parents about their behavior. Within an hour, I got an angry text from Mom. Thanks for turning Grandma against us too. I didn't respond. I was learning that engaging with their drama only encouraged more of it. The next few days brought a parade of family members calling to get the real story. My cousin Tyler called, confused because his parents had told him I was being vindictive and cruel to my parents. "Dude, they're saying you just abandoned them without warning," he said. "That doesn't sound like you." I walked him through the whole situation, including showing him some of the notes I'd kept about their comments. His reaction was immediate and angry. "Are you kidding me? They were taking advantage of you this whole time? And then they humiliated you at Thanksgiving for it?" Tyler had always been one of my favorite relatives. We were close in age and had grown up together. His support meant a lot to me. "I can't believe they played the victim in front of everyone," he continued. "Mom and Dad felt so bad for them. We were all thinking you were being a spoiled brat." "I don't blame any of you for believing them," I said. "They were very convincing." Tyler immediately called his parents to set the record straight. Within hours, I was getting apologetic calls from Aunt Jennifer and Uncle Mike, expressing their shock and offering their support. But my parents weren't giving up. On Thursday, 3 days after the confrontation at my apartment, Mom showed up at my workplace. I was in a client meeting when my manager Jessica knocked on the conference room door. "Sarah, there's a woman here claiming to be your mother," she said quietly. "She's pretty upset and causing a scene in the lobby." I excused myself from the meeting and went downstairs to find Mom crying dramatically in our office lobby, telling anyone who would listen about her ungrateful daughter who abandoned her family. "Mom, you need to leave," I said firmly. "This is my workplace." "I need to talk to you," she sobbed. "Please, just 5 minutes." I was mortified that she'd brought this drama to my office, but I also didn't want to make an even bigger scene. I agreed to step outside with her for a brief conversation. "The power company wants $800 to turn the electricity back on," she said immediately. "We don't have it." "Then you'll have to make payment arrangements with them," I replied. "Most utility companies offer payment plans. Can't you just help us this one time?" she begged. "Just until we get back on our feet?" "No," I said simply. "You made it clear that helping you made me a freeloader. I'm respecting your wishes by handling my own responsibilities and letting you handle yours." She started crying harder, but I could see the manipulation in it. This was the same performance she'd given our relatives, designed to make me look heartless and cruel. "What will people think of you?" she asked. "Letting your parents suffer like this? They'll think I learned the lessons you taught me about responsibility and independence," I replied. "Now, please leave. I have to get back to work." I went back inside, leaving her in the parking lot. Jessica approached me with concern. "Is everything okay?" she asked. That seemed really intense. I gave her a brief overview of the situation. Jessica, who was about 10 years older than me and had dealt with her own difficult family dynamics, was completely supportive. "Good for you," she said firmly. "Setting boundaries with family is one of the hardest things to do, but sometimes it's necessary for your own sanity." That afternoon, I got a call from Dad. His tone was different, less angry, more desperate. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said. "Can you meet us for dinner tonight?" "No," I replied. "But you can call me if you want to have a conversation." "This is too important for a phone call." "Then it's too important for me to risk having another public scene," I shot back. "After Mom's performance at my office today, I'm not meeting you anywhere in person." There was a long pause. "She went to your work?" "She did. And made a scene in front of my colleagues and clients. So if you want to talk, we do it by phone or we don't do it at all." He agreed reluctantly. That evening, both of them called me together on speakerphone. Their tone was more subdued, less accusatory. "We've been doing some thinking," Dad started. "And maybe we didn't handle the Thanksgiving thing very well." "Maybe?" I repeated. "You humiliated me in front of our entire family while I was secretly paying most of your bills." "We didn't realize how much you were actually contributing," Mom added. "We thought you were just helping out a little bit." "You never bothered to find out," I said. "In 2 years, neither of you ever once asked what I was actually paying for or thanked me for my contributions. You just took my money while treating me like garbage." "We're grateful," Dad said quickly. "We really are." "No, you're panicked," I corrected. "There's a difference. You're grateful now because you're realizing what you lost. But you weren't grateful when you had it." They tried to negotiate again. "What if I moved back and they treated me better? What if I didn't move back but helped with just the essential bills? What if they paid me back over time?" "I'm not interested in any arrangement that makes me financially responsible for your choices," I said firmly. "You're both adults with jobs. Figure it out." The conversation ended badly, with both of them frustrated and me feeling emotionally drained. But I was also proud of myself for holding firm on my boundaries. Over the weekend, I decided to take a short trip to visit my college friend Amanda in Chicago. I needed some distance from the situation and some perspective from someone who knew me well but wasn't involved in the family drama. Amanda had been my roommate junior and senior year, and she'd heard plenty about my family dynamics during our late-night conversations. When I told her what had happened, she was furious on my behalf. "I cannot believe they had the audacity to call you a freeloader," she said over dinner at a trendy restaurant in Lincoln Park. "You've been basically supporting them for 2 years. The crazy thing is, I think they actually believe their own narrative," I said. "They convinced themselves that I was this irresponsible kid who couldn't manage without them, while simultaneously taking my money to fund their lifestyle." Amanda shook her head. "It's like they were living in an alternate reality. How did you put up with it for so long?" That was a question I'd been asking myself. I think I kept hoping they'd eventually appreciate what I was doing and start treating me better. And I felt guilty about the idea of leaving them in a financial bind. "But they didn't feel guilty about leaving you in an emotional bind," Amanda pointed out. "They were perfectly fine with making you miserable as long as you were paying their bills." Spending the weekend with Amanda was exactly what I needed. She reminded me of who I was outside of my family's dysfunction. We went shopping, visited museums, tried new restaurants, and just had fun. I felt like myself again, confident, capable, and worthy of respect. On Sunday, as I was driving back to Ohio, I got a call from my cousin Madison, Tyler's younger sister. She was in college and had always looked up to me. "Sarah, I just wanted to say I think you're amazing," she said. "Tyler told me what really happened, and I can't believe Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert treated you like that." "Thanks, Madison. That means a lot. I'm actually kind of inspired by you," she continued. "The way you stood up for yourself and didn't let them guilt you into going back. I hope I can be that strong someday." Her words hit me harder than she probably realized. For so long, I'd felt weak and pathetic for staying in such a toxic situation. But Madison saw strength in my decision to leave, and maybe she was right. When I got home that evening, there was a letter slipped under my door. It was from my parents, written in Mom's handwriting. The tone was different from our previous conversations, less demanding, more pleading. They acknowledged that they'd handled things poorly and that they were struggling financially. They asked if we could work out some kind of arrangement where I helped them transition to managing their expenses independently. The letter felt more genuine than their previous attempts at reconciliation, but I still wasn't interested in being drawn back into their financial problems. I'd learned that helping them had never actually helped them, it had enabled them to avoid taking responsibility for their choices. I wrote back a brief note explaining that I wished them well but that I wouldn't be resuming any financial assistance. I suggested they look into financial counseling and resources for people in their situation. Monday at work, I threw myself into a new project, grateful for the distraction. My manager Jessica had been incredibly understanding about the whole situation and had even given me some additional responsibilities that came with a small raise. "You seem different," she observed during our weekly check-in. "More confident, more focused." She was right. Despite the family drama, I felt better about myself than I had in years. I was making my own decisions, living within my means, and not constantly stressed about other people's problems. That week, I also started seeing a therapist. I'd been resistant to the idea before, thinking that seeking help would somehow validate my parents' narrative that I couldn't handle my own life. But my friend Amanda had convinced me that therapy was a sign of strength, not weakness. Dr. Linda Martinez was a family therapist who specialized in boundary issues and financial abuse. Yes, she confirmed, what my parents had been doing was a form of financial abuse, taking my money while making me feel guilty and worthless. "It's actually quite common," she explained during our first session. "Adult children who are successful often find themselves supporting parents who then resent them for it. It's a twisted dynamic where the person providing help gets blamed for being needed." She helped me understand that my guilt about leaving my parents in a difficult situation was normal but misplaced. I wasn't responsible for their financial choices, and enabling their irresponsibility hadn't been helping anyone. "You gave them a gift by forcing them to take responsibility for their own lives," she said. "They may not see it that way now, but it's actually the most loving thing you could have done." Meanwhile, the family drama continued to unfold. I heard through the grapevine that my parents had approached several relatives asking for loans to help them get back on their feet. Most of them, now knowing the real story, had declined. Uncle Mike told Tyler that he'd been tempted to help until he realized that doing so would just enable the same behavior that I'd been trying to stop. "If Sarah couldn't fix their spending problems with $42,000, I'm certainly not going to try with a few thousand," he said. My parents were forced to make some hard choices. They put the house on the market, but the real estate market was slow, and they were facing foreclosure proceedings. Dad picked up every construction job he could find, often working 7 days a week. Mom started working double shifts at the dental office and picked up a part-time evening job at a retail store. I heard about their struggles through family members, and I'll admit, there were moments when I felt guilty. But Dr. Martinez helped me understand that guilt was a conditioned response from years of being manipulated. Ask yourself, she said, are they suffering because you're being cruel, or are they suffering because they're finally facing the consequences of their own choices? The answer was clearly the latter. I hadn't created their financial problems, I'd been postponing them. The day of reckoning had always been coming, I'd just stopped delaying it. In January, about a month after I'd moved out, I got a surprising call from Mrs. Henderson, an elderly neighbor who'd lived next door to my parents for 15 years. I'd always liked her, and she'd always been kind to me. "Sarah, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling," she said. "I got your number from your grandmother." "Of course not, Mrs. Henderson. How are you?" "I'm fine, but I wanted to talk to you about your parents. I've been watching what's been happening, and I feel like there are some things you should know." She went on to tell me that she'd overheard many of the conversations my parents had about me over the years. She knew I'd been paying for most of their expenses, and she'd been horrified by how they talked about me. "They would complain about you constantly," she said. "But then they'd brag about not having to pay for internet or cable because you covered it. It never made sense to me." She also told me that since I'd moved out, she'd seen a different side of them. They were working harder, arguing less, and seemed more focused on actual problem solving rather than complaining. "I think you did the right thing, dear," she said. "Sometimes people need to hit rock bottom before they can start building themselves back up." Her perspective was valuable because she'd been watching the situation from the outside for years. She confirmed what I'd suspected, that my parents had been living in a state of comfortable dysfunction, enabled by my financial support. As Christmas approached, I started getting the guilt trip texts and calls I'd expected. Mom would send me pictures of their sparse Christmas decorations with captions like "Wish we could afford a real tree this year." Dad would call and mention how they'd had to cancel their usual holiday traditions due to money problems. I didn't respond to the manipulation attempts, but they still bothered me. Dr. Martinez helped me work through the guilt and develop strategies for dealing with the emotional manipulation. "They're hoping to wear down your resolve," she explained. "But every time you respond to manipulation, you reinforce the behavior. The kindest thing you can do is maintain your boundaries consistently." Christmas Day was actually wonderful. I spent it with Marcus's family, who welcomed me warmly. His parents, David and Linda, treated me like a daughter from the moment we met. They were interested in my work, respectful of my opinions, and grateful for my contributions to family activities. "It's so nice to have another woman around," Linda said as we cooked dinner together. "Marcus has told us so much about you, and it's clear he adores you." The contrast with my own family's treatment was stark. Here were people who barely knew me treating me with more respect and kindness than my own parents had shown in years. Marcus and I exchanged gifts, and he surprised me with a beautiful necklace and a heartfelt card expressing how proud he was of me for standing up for myself and building an independent life. "You're the strongest person I know," he wrote. "Watching you handle this situation with such grace and dignity has made me admire you even more." I realized that this was what healthy relationships look like: mutual respect, genuine appreciation, and support during difficult times. It made me even more certain that I'd made the right choice in leaving my parents' house. Over the next few days, I got several calls from various family members. Apparently, Mom and Dad had reached out to everyone looking for help with their suddenly impossible financial situation. However, they were forced to explain why I'd moved out so abruptly, which meant admitting they'd been wrong about who was supporting whom. Aunt Jennifer called me directly. "Sarah, honey, I had no idea you were paying for everything. Your parents made it sound like you were taking advantage of them." I explained the whole situation to her, including showing her the financial records I'd kept. She was appalled at how they'd treated me and publicly humiliated me. "I feel terrible that I didn't speak up at Thanksgiving," she said. "I should have known something wasn't right." "It's not your fault," I assured her. They were very convincing in their victim act. Word spread quickly through our extended family. Cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends all reached out to express their support and apologize for believing my parents' version of events. The narrative had completely flipped. My parents, meanwhile, were scrambling to deal with their new reality. They had to choose which utilities to turn back on based on what they could actually afford. They ended up keeping electricity and water but canceling cable and downgrading their internet to basic service. They also had to drop comprehensive insurance on their cars and switch to liability only. Dad picked up extra construction jobs wherever he could find them, working 6 days a week. Mom started looking for full-time work. They put their house on the market, realizing they couldn't afford the mortgage payments without my contribution. About 2 weeks after I moved out, I got a text from Mom: "We're sorry. We were wrong. Please come back." I didn't respond immediately. I was busy enjoying my new life. My apartment was perfect, my work was going great, and I was dating a nice guy named Marcus I'd met at a coffee shop near my office. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely happy and stress-free. When I finally responded, it was simple: I appreciate the apology, but I'm very happy with my new living situation. She tried calling several times, but I didn't answer. Finally, she showed up at my apartment one evening with Dad in tow. They looked exhausted and defeated. "Please, Sarah," Dad said. "We made a mistake. We're sorry." "I accept your apology," I replied. "But that doesn't change anything. You showed me exactly how you view me and how willing you are to humiliate me when it serves your purposes." "We were just stressed about money," Mom said. "We didn't mean those things." "But you said them anyway," I pointed out. "In front of our entire family. And when I tried to defend myself, you cut me off and doubled down. They tried to negotiate various arrangements. What if I just moved back and paid less? What if I moved back but they treated me better? What if we drew up a formal agreement about expenses and expectations?" I declined every proposal. "I'm not interested in any arrangement that involves moving backward," I told them. "I like my life now. I like my independence. I like being treated with respect in my own home." The truth was, living with them had been slowly destroying my mental health. I hadn't realized how much stress I was carrying from constantly walking on eggshells, being criticized and belittled, and financially supporting people who showed me no gratitude or respect. Christmas came and went. I spent it with Marcus's family, who welcomed me warmly. My parents sent several guilt-laden texts about how I was ruining the family holiday, but I didn't let it affect me. By January, they'd been forced to move into a small rental apartment across town. They'd sold their house, but after paying off the mortgage and various debts, there wasn't much left. Dad was working constantly, and Mom had found a full-time position at a medical office. Ironically, the forced downsizing and increased work schedule seemed to be good for them in some ways. They were more focused, less entitled, and had to actually budget and manage their money responsibly. In February, I ran into them at the grocery store. The encounter was awkward but civil. They looked tired but healthier somehow. Dad had lost weight from all the physical labor, and Mom seemed more energetic. "How are you doing?" Mom asked tentatively. "I'm great," I replied honestly. "Really happy." "We heard you're seeing someone," Dad said. "I am. Marcus is wonderful." There was an uncomfortable silence before Mom spoke again. "We really are sorry, Sarah. We know we messed up." "I know you are," I said. "And I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or going back to the way things were." That seemed to hit them hard. I think they'd been hoping that eventually I'd get over it and things could go back to normal. But there was no normal to go back to. The old normal had been deeply unhealthy for everyone involved. As I write this, it's been 6 months since I moved out. My relationship with my parents is slowly improving, but it's different now. We see each other occasionally for coffee or lunch. The conversations are more respectful and honest. They've never again made comments about my life choices or independence. They've also never asked me for money, which I appreciate. They seem to understand that part of rebuilding trust means proving they can manage their own financial responsibilities. Marcus and I are talking about moving in together, which is exciting. My career is going great, and I got a promotion with a nice salary increase. I've been able to save money, travel a little, and just enjoy being a normal young adult without the weight of supporting 2 other adults who didn't appreciate it. The funny thing is, I think my parents are actually happier now too. They had to grow up and take responsibility for their choices. They're working together as a team instead of relying on me to solve their problems. Their marriage seems stronger, and they have more self-respect. Sometimes people ask if I regret how I handled the situation. They think maybe I was too harsh, too vindictive. But I don't see it that way. I gave my parents exactly what they said they wanted, an independent daughter who takes full responsibility for her own life. I also gave them the opportunity to take responsibility for theirs. The real lesson here isn't about revenge or payback. It's about boundaries and self-respect. For 2 years, I allowed myself to be financially exploited and emotionally abused because I felt guilty and obligated. I thought being a good daughter meant accepting mistreatment and subsidizing their irresponsibility. But being a good daughter doesn't mean being a doormat. It doesn't mean sacrificing your mental health and financial future to enable other people's poor choices. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in dysfunction. My parents learned they were capable of much more than they'd been giving. When they had no choice but to step up, they did. They found better jobs, managed their money more carefully, and started treating their relationship with more respect. And I learned that I was worth more than I'd been accepting. I deserved to live in a home where I was appreciated, not criticized. I deserved to have my contributions acknowledged, not dismissed. I deserved to be treated like a valued family member, not a convenient scapegoat. Looking back, that Thanksgiving dinner was actually a gift, though it didn't feel like it at the time. It forced me to see the situation clearly and make changes I'd been too scared or guilty to make on my own. Sometimes you need someone to show you exactly who they are before you can find the courage to walk away. I'm grateful for the experience now, even though it was painful. It taught me to stand up for myself, to recognize my worth, and to insist on being treated with respect. Those are lessons that will serve me well for the rest of my life. And my parents? They're better people now too. Stronger, more responsible, more honest about themselves and their relationships. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their worst impulses. We'll probably never have the close relationship some families enjoy, but we have something better than what we had before: mutual respect, honest communication, and healthy boundaries. That feels like a victory to me.